I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here in front of y'all tonight. It's hard to follow Mike drop Brittany, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I think to fully express how God's healing the stigmas within me, I think at first I have to kind of lay out some of the stigmas and the stigmatic behaviors that have been part of my life. And I'm going to read them because it's a long list. Over the course of my life, I've been a narcissist, a serial abuser of my wife and children, emotionally, verbally, sometimes physically. I've been a drug abuser, an alcohol abuser, a rageaholic, an adulterer, a sex addict, an intimidator, a liar, thief, controller, manipulator of people, circumstances, user of people. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, with OCD and antisocial tendencies. And I've experienced symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, depression, and anger for my entire life, at least as far back as I can remember. Saying those things and carrying those stigmas are not easy. But I think for the journey that I've been on in recovery, it's just vital to be able to stand, not just in front of my loved ones and the people in my sphere of influence that those behaviors have impacted the most, my wife and children. And my wife is a very courageous, brave woman who is going through the journey of reconciliation with me despite all of my transgressions. And I'm eternally grateful for the grace she's shown me and her willingness to try to resurrect and save our relationship, and the love she's shown me and support she's shown me. But I think in order to fully walk this journey that I'm on, I have to be able to vulnerably and in a transparent way share those things about myself, share those behaviors that were so much a part of my life. Sexual betrayal, 30 years of it with my wife. It's not an easy thing to talk about. It's not an easy stigma to carry. It's not an easy label to have. To say the level of regret that I have for behaviors over the course of my life are shame-inducing is it doesn't even scratch the surface. However, here I am today. And what I've learned through this process, the places that I've gone and the people that God's put in my life to work with and try to become an authentic human being and the man He designed me to be, is that all of these behaviors, all of these stigmatic things that I've done, all of these labels that can be put on me, are all in some form or fashion a result of trauma that I've experienced in my life, either family of origin trauma or trauma in adulthood. And I think it's important to preface this next part of the talk by saying in no way does any kind of trauma a human being has experienced excuse abusive behaviors, excuse hurting, damaging the people that they love. There is no excuse for that. But there has to be, there are causal reasons that a human being could do the things I've done. I wasn't born as a child with the desire to emotionally abuse my wife, abuse alcohol, be a sex addict. I mean, none of that. I wasn't born to do those things. I don't think very many humans are. So, trauma. Give you a brief family history. I was raised in South Charlotte, middle class, working class family. Had a father, very charismatic, big, gregarious. People loved him. He was also a very miserable, self-hating human being. And he fostered an environment and a climate in our household that was consistently violent and rageful and unsafe. Result of that was a lot of modeled behaviors that became my behaviors as I got older, but the bigger part that came of it was just a high level of carried shame and just not being enough, ever being enough. My mother was a very young wife. She was trying to do her best in that environment. But quite frankly, she used us kids, especially me, as emotional supplements, and there was a high degree of enmeshment that I was exposed to. Nothing sexual, but definitely put in inappropriate emotional positions that ultimately led to a high degree of being protector of my family, in my family, especially my kids, and ultimately giving me a lot of rope that resulted in a lot of my narcissistic behaviors and tendencies that developed over the course of my life. That doing whatever I needed to do to whoever I needed to do it to was okay if it gave me some relief from my pain. The home life I described ultimately led to my brother destroying himself at age 21 through suicide. That was how he dealt with the trauma that we grew up in. And it pushed my sister, who never got real love for her father, into the arms of a man that ultimately ended up being an abusive man. And she had two beautiful sons out of it, but it moved her into a fairly unstable life situation, and she ultimately had an untimely death by cancer. It was really sad. But I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough has been the mantra of my life, and I found that through the recovery process and some of the facilities I did some work in, that seems to be the mantra of a lot of people's lives. And it seems to be the narrative that is consistent in their minds, in their internal monologue. Self-hate, no self-empathy, no self-love. Trauma is a damaging thing. For me, it resulted in an extreme need for external validation, which led to a lot of unhealthy and inappropriate behaviors, both physically and just emotionally in relational situations. For me, I wore a lot of masks over the course of my life, and took on a lot of personas. Cool guy, band guy, football coach, whatever I could put on and have success and not allow anyone to see what I saw myself as, which was a wretched human being, unworthy of love. And if anybody really knew who I was, they would certainly hate me. inauthentic person. But that was my way of protecting myself from the fear that I had had my entire life, from the traumas that I experienced. So, towards the end of my bottom, I had separated myself from God. My marriage was going down the tubes. And honestly, after years and years, 50 years of obsessive thinking and the stress that could put on your life, despite being in pretty good shape, I ended up having heart surgery. And I was to the point where I was ready to die. I didn't want to live anymore. When they put me under for my surgery, I prayed to God to not let me wake up. I mean, that's the point that I had gotten to. So how did God lead my recovery? I had some excellent healthcare folks, a therapist, Julie Martin, who exposed me to trauma therapy and helped introduce me to some ways that I could feel better and get better. I went to a couple of facilities, and that's where I started learning about trauma. That's where I learned about that a lot of things that happened to me I didn't deserve. I was just a kid. And that in all that God still loved me, that God delighted in me. As I worked through some of this trauma, processed it, identified it, I came to believe that. I came to believe what the Bible had always said, which I felt like it was meant for everyone, but not me. I finally started to believe that God really did love me. And God really did delight in me. And that I was a good person. And, I was not the actions that I had lived so much of my life. And slowly through a lot of treatment, a lot of therapy, a lot of exercises, a lot of experiential stuff, a lot of EMDR, a lot of group, a lot of one-on-one therapy, I started to believe that. And I'm just grateful to God for bringing me through that and giving me grace, the grace of my children and the grace of my wife. So for me, it's been a consistent thing: therapy, group, reading affirmations every day for a year and a half, starting to develop new neural pathways and exercise neuroplasticity, where the negative voices in my head of self-hate and self-loathing have been replaced by the voice of the Lord, which is, I am enough, I am worthy, I am loved. And understanding that that's why he died. He died so I don't have to feel this way. And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that if the creator of this beautiful universe and everything in it, the beautiful people, and love encapsulated, feels that way about me, who am I to feel any other way but in agreement? But it's not easy. It's a challenge. For me, it was 50 plus years of those negative voices. But I can tell you the affirmations work. They shut those voices up. And I had printed out some affirmations that I've used, and I would urge you, it's the simplest way that you can start to change that internal narrative and that internal monologue to rather one of self-hate to one of self-love, and to start seeing yourself the way God sees you. I would also recommend a book called Anatomy of the Soul by Dr. Kurt Thompson. He's been on Kim's Flip Your Lid podcast. It's amazing, and will give you a clear understanding of what God thinks about us. Mostly it's trying to treat emotions as data and not things that deserve a specific behavior or response, but just understanding that that's just another thing that I have to take in. So I would urge everyone, any tools you can use, hemisync music, binaural music, consistent Bible reading and interacting with the Lord day in and day out, are all vital ways. And I'll just close this and just say, we're all valuable children that he loves. We're all works in progress. But I know I'm living God's will for my life today. And for me, my mantra is Ephesians 4:2, which boiled down says, be gentle, be humble, be patient, and be loving. And I think that's for the people that we come in contact with, especially the person that we look at in the mirror. I really appreciate the opportunity to share.